What's up, and welcome to Clarity for Parents of Athletes, bringing you stories from professional athletes about their parents and how they were raised. My name is Gabe Nosair from aclearmind.com. All right, and welcome to episode number 45. I hope you're doing well, staying healthy, staying in the present moment, sleeping well, hydrating, eating nutritious whole foods, exercising plentifully, and really taking time to keep your body and your spirit as healthy as possible. Now, this episode is with a legend of U.S. women's soccer. Her name is Lesle Gallimore, and she was the head coach at the University of Washington for many years. Before that, she grew up in Southern California and grew up around some amazing legends of the game. And she talks about that in this interview, some like really legends. I'm not talking about Messi and Ronaldo type legends. I'm talking about some really big legends of the game that she got to watch as a child in Southern California, and she went on to play college at Cal Berkeley, and then started her head coaching career at San Diego State, and then eventually moved up to what she considered at that time her dream job up at the University of Washington, where she just recently retired and now picked up a new job as commissioner of the Girls Academy, which is a brand new organization that started after the ending of the U.S. Development Academy on the girls' side just a few months back. So she talks about that. She talks about the landscape of recruiting and gives you tips on what to do without camps and without some tournaments going on, without showcases. How do you navigate that? So in the interview, Lesle gives you a lot of amazing tips and advice as a soccer parent specifically, and also gives us a look into her youth, her childhood, her family life, and what it was like growing up in Southern California during this time of watching legends. Now, as usual, I leave my takeaways at the end of the episode, so after I sign off with Lesle, just stay tuned for a couple more minutes, and I tie in some of the biggest pieces that struck me the most from this interview. All right, enjoy. All right, Lesle, thanks so much for your time today. You're in the hotbed of COVID right now up in Seattle. What's your experience been like for the last couple months?
Yeah, it's been interesting. I came back from the under 20 women's CONCACAF qualifiers from Dominican Republic straight to Florida, where I did an A license, and it got cut short by about a half a day because people were panicked about getting out on flights and getting home. And it was pretty much a shut-in from March through June. And then I did take a flight down to see my mom for her 81st birthday at the beginning of June. But for the most part, I've been here. COVID was one thing, and then it kind of, this was a hotbed originally. And then I thought our state did a pretty good job of controlling our numbers, and people shut down pretty quickly. The Black Lives Matters protests were also huge here and still continue to be pretty huge and publicly touted. And so that's another, kind of spotlight that's been on Seattle. But in general, life here has been, we going about our business and behaving for the most part compared to some other things we're watching around the country. So it's a lot of time to reflect. And my retirement, I tell people I felt a little bit gypped that I finished my 30-something years of college coaching and thought I was going to have all this time to travel the world. And that got put on lockdown, and everybody else is just home like me. So everyone's on my same schedule.
Yeah, I'm sure it's probably been an adjustment because you're so busy coaching or you were at least at the college level, and then in other things as well with coaching education and everything else that you had going on. It must be a totally foreign experience for you to be in one place for so long. Yeah,
it's been strange. This is definitely the least amount I've flown or traveled in my adult life. It has been a little bit strange. You think my room and my room in my house would be cleaner and just up to speed. I did hit it hard on the gardening early on, but that's also kind of started to wane. And now the computer screen and grading A license candidate assignments and doing some different podcasts. And now with this new job that I've taken on recently, it started to ramp up again. So much for leisure.
Yeah. Well, I hope you enjoyed the slower pace at least for a little while, and that your garden looks nice. And
Yeah,
I'm sure it's getting plenty of rain up there in Seattle as well.
yeah,
So
enough.
yeah. So I definitely want to get to your new job, your new role in soccer, but I want to go backward in time for a little bit and get to know you, the young Leslie
Hmm.
Gallimore. What was she like? Where did she grow up? What was her family like? What sports did she play?
Uh-huh. Yeah, well, that's not a short story, but I will. I'll try to summarize for you pretty quickly. I grew up in Southern California in Redondo Beach, and I have three brothers, two older brothers and a younger brother. And my parents split when I was fairly young, so I have a single mother who, to this day, still at 81, works full time in hospital administration.
Oh wow.
She's a warrior, yeah. And so I kind of learned my work ethic from my mom. We were really fortunate that my grandmother was able to take care of us while my mom worked. So I have again, I tell people this all the time. I'm starting just now at my age to connect the dots on how I ended up being me. But I have had a lot of strong women in my life that have shown me, just through their love and their care and their kindness and their work ethic, just sort of how to be. And that's sort of been the fabric of how I grew up. The athletic side of me, I will credit to fending off three brothers from fights. And while my mom was at work and maybe my grandma was busy doing laundry and dishes and cleaning up after us, I don't know. But I definitely can credit. My mom was a pretty good athlete, actually, but I can credit a lot of my athletic ability just out of self-defense, trying to survive in a household with three boys. And
Yeah.
there were often times I'd call my mom at work and say that, they're picking on me again, they're coming after me, and she'd say, just pick up the largest thing you can find and just swing it at them until I can get home. And okay, I was just shocked that I wasn't a tennis player or a baseball player, because I did a lot of swinging. Um, but I was able to find the sport of soccer, not at the youngest age of how kids are now, but we just played a lot. I went to the beach a lot. I surfed a lot. I swam a lot. We were just kind of outdoorsy kids, and because we grew up in Southern California, the weather was nice enough year round to be able to do that. Threw a lot of balls, rode bikes a lot, skateboards, all of it. But the way I found soccer is that my mom was, and again, if you knew my mom, this would really make you laugh, is that she agreed to be a den mother for my two older brothers for Boy Scouts one year, Cub
Mm-hmm.
Scouts. And that lasted one year of Cub Scouts. And I could tell that it wasn't really my mom's cup of tea, being a den mother for the Boy Scouts. So when I was in third grade and I asked her if I could join the Girl Scouts or Bluebirds or Brownies or whatever it was, she said no. And can't you find something else to do? And I was like, geez, okay. So there was a sign hanging up in our area that said register for AYSO for soccer. And it was right at the very, very beginning in Southern California when AYSO was just starting nationally. And I was not on the first round of girls teams, but I was on the pretty close to the first round of girl teams in AYSO. And it was a tremendous organization. So I signed up for AYSO and started playing soccer in the third, fourth grade. And, all you needed was a pair of cleats, and we managed to scrape up enough money for those. Didn't even have to have your own ball. And that's how my soccer career got started. I was really fortunate to grow up in an area, and may he rest in peace. Ziggy Schmidt is a dear, lifelong friend of mine. And, when he became the Sounders coach, nobody was happier than I was. And he was a mentor to me as a college coach when he was at UCLA and when he was in the national teams and as a coaching educator. He's just a person that literally and figuratively loomed very large in my life. And his dad Fritz, and his brother Roland is my age. His dad Fritz had a lot to do with soccer in the South Bay, which is Redondo Beach in the area, in Torrance, where we grew up. And so I was already in the 70s in a very soccer rich part of the country. The NASL was going strong. We had the LA Aztecs, and we saw the likes of Pele and George Best and Johan Cruyff come through our town. And I was able to be a ball girl at those games. And
Oh wow.
a lot of those players ended up staying, in the country after the league folded and became coaches themselves. And I worked camps with the likes of Bobby McAlinden, and Brian Boswell was a British guy who ended up being my youth coach from the age of 13 through 19. I played on the same team for the same coach. And so I just, I was born into something very, very fortunate when it came to soccer, as a girl especially. And that's kind of where it all started for me. And it just didn't end. I was able to play at a pretty high level as a youth player. College was never something I really thought about as far as soccer was concerned. And I ended up just going to school near home at UC Irvine, where there was no soccer program, but I was young enough to play one more year on my club team. And I got recruited off my club team at night there. I was 17 at the time, but I was a freshman in college. And I said, well, I'm already in school. And some of the schools, Santa Clara being one and Cal Berkeley being the other, said, well, you can transfer. We do have a team or club sport, but we're getting varsity status, and we need to get this thing off the ground. So I went to Cal with 5 or 6 of my teammates from my youth club, and I was the club president my freshman year, and the rest is a little bit history. But I enjoyed a great playing career at Cal that turned into an accidental coaching career that turned into a life career. So a year of law school was in there somewhere, where I decided I didn't want to be a lawyer, that coaching and playing was more fun. And I was able to land a dream job at Washington in 1994, and that ended at December of 2019. And I'll write a book about it at some point, because my journey has been it's been a fun one, and it's not over yet. But the college career and my playing career were certainly, I just feel really blessed and fortunate to have been in the game this long, and to be able to have experienced the things I've experienced.
Yeah, you were around some legends of the game. What an incredible and really blessed opportunity that you had growing up in Southern California at that time.
Yeah, the funny thing is I was I was a ball girl at one of the LA Aztecs games, and we were at halftime. We were led into the tunnel, and the teams came out at half, and we were near their locker rooms. And one of my friends, we were like, look at their jerseys, like their practice jerseys are on their chairs or whatever at the Rose Bowl. And I was like, ooh, Johan Cruyff's jersey. And I want to say one of us took one, like a practice jersey.
I hope so.
Well, I don't have it. So if it wasn't me, I either took it and someone took it from me, or it just didn't make the move, or I don't know what happened to it. But the funny thing is a good friend of mine is his son-in-law, and he does the Tovo Academy in Barcelona now. And I might have to hit him up for something Johan at some point in time, because I between George Best and Johan Cruyff and Pele, I don't think I could have grown up watching 3 better players. And
oh my God,
live as a 12, 13-year-old. And I just, I fell in love with the game. I fell in love with the artistry of it. I fell in love with everything about it, and again, soccer made in Germany on TV, because Ziggy and his family were able to tell people, hey, there's this opportunity for you guys to watch games. And we're like, what, on television, really? And so I feel really fortunate to have that in my background. And it made me fall in love with the game for life.
Yeah, I can imagine, man. Wow. That is an incredible story. You said your mom wasn't quite into the Boy Scouts and kind of pushed you away from Girl Scouts there. What was her involvement during your soccer career like?
Yeah, looking back on it, it was perfect. She made sure somehow, some way, she did, or the other people on my team, or I had a bike, and life was simpler then. You just had to get to a park where you were practicing, and it was usually pretty close to home, so no one really needed a ride anywhere. I don't ever remember her coming to a practice. She probably dropped me off, or maybe was waiting at the end once in a while. But I had a bike, I had a moped, I had a unicycle. I could get myself to and from practice.
Unicycle, huh?
I will tell you, because my mom's probably too old to be arrested now, or a skateboard. My mom's probably too old to be thrown in prison now. But I will say that age 14, my mom I had a moped as an 8th grade graduation present. So I got a moped when I was probably 13 or 14. So I had a little motorized way to get around to do the job. I worked at a couple different places, Marie Callender's, hot dog on a stick. I could get to my jobs. I could get to soccer practice on my moped. But when I was a freshman or almost a sophomore in high school, because I was young for my grade, I was 17 when I graduated from high school, my mom finally threw the car keys at me and said, she would never do this to my brothers because they lacked any kind of brain cells or responsibility. But she threw me the car keys to her Fiat X19 stick shift and said, here, take the car only for work and soccer practice and back. And if you crash or hurt anybody, I'll go to jail. So my life will be. I'm like, okay. So I did drive
No
illegally.
pressure.
I did drive illegally on and off for about a year before I took driver's ed and got my driver's permit.
Wow.
Um, yeah, but in general, my mom was a fan. You know, she loved coming to games when she could get off work early enough to come to high school games. She did on the weekends. She, you know, and then she started dragging her three sisters, my aunts, out to games to come and watch. And uh, you know, she loved watching me play. I think she was proud of me, and I always knew she was proud of me. Uh, she would never comment on anything. More, you know, that wasn't your best game. It would hurt me to my core. But it was also a great reality check that I wasn't, you know, that I was no better than anyone else on my team. She cheered for everybody. She, you know, she was just kind of the sideline person that was there, and I felt her presence, but there was no real conversations that went on around a lot of it. She loved the other kids on my team and my friends, and loved my coach, and just trusted that he was doing right by us. And it was, you know, the epitome of the days of it being your thing as a kid and not your parents' thing. So it was,
Yeah.
I remember it all like it was yesterday, and I wish for kids now that they had even just a little bit of that back.
That's so lucky. Yeah, but it's a blessing that parents really didn't know soccer back in the day, and some still don't know soccer, but they still decide to put in their opinion about everything. So it's really a blessing to just for your mom to have just let you have your experience and not be too involved with her opinions.
Right, right. Yeah. And again, I just didn't, I think my brothers kept me in check too. And I kept them in check. My little brother started playing soccer and went up through AYSO to the point where they were traveling from Southern California to Northern California to play in-state sort of championship games at the AYSO level. And, you know, and he would have been he started surfing, so which was free. And he just became a surfer as opposed to a soccer player. But, you know, it was fun to kind of be his, he's a couple years younger than me, so to watch him play and kind of be his coach, mentor, critic, cheerleader was fun also. But it was all just like because we loved it, not because we, you know, thought it would get us anywhere. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it was really just for the love of it.
That's awesome. What was the coaching like? What was your development like as a youth player?
Yeah, it was. That's something that I've thought back on a lot, and I will, you know, as I kind of go into the twilight here, I will think more about that because I do think I'll write a book about it at some point, and this will be included in the book. Is that my knowledge of the game, and this is not from a, you know, an arrogant standpoint of what I know about it, but just how I see it and what I was exposed to when I was younger. I talked a lot about the NASL players and being a fan of watching the sport as well as playing it, but. I remember going to practice with our club team again. You know, once I went from being an AYSO player, I don't remember a ton about AYSO coaching. I just remember playing. I don't remember being taught about positions or, you know, formations or whatever. It was just all about dribbling and passing and trying to score goals and having fun. And then when I joined a club team going into my freshman year of high school, I think I played eighth grade on, um, and I remember just small-sided games being huge at our practices. We'd
Hmm.
run, we'd do some fitness stuff, almost always with the ball at the beginning of practice, and then our coach would always play. Brian would always play in with us, and if the teams were uneven, they were uneven. We rarely had neutral players, so you'd play 6v5, you'd play 4v3, you'd play
Hmm.
whatever it was. You just divided it up, and you rarely ever had a neutral player. So you had to learn to play numbers up, you had to learn to play numbers down, and solve it. And it was about small group play. So at a really young age, just knowing what combination play looked like, what defending 1v1 looked like. And we, you know, my friends and I, when he wasn't with us, we would always just try to play 1v1 to go to trees, you know, whatever
Hmm.
the nearest marker was. Okay, we were at the beach, bring a ball down to the beach, play. We'll put a stick in the sand here, a stick in the sand there, one of our flip flops here, one of our flip flops there, and we'll play, you know, we'll play to 1v1 to the sandal or whatever. And um, we just loved it. And so I just remember a lot of small sided stuff, not a lot of big group tactics. Uh, we had some incredible players on our team that went on to great careers, including Karen Jennings Gabera, who I played with as a youth player, who went on to win the first golden ball at the World Cup in China in 91. I had to defend against her for years. She went to college at Santa Barbara. I went to school at Cal, and she's probably one of the best 1v1 artists as a female that I've ever watched. Unique,
Hmm.
as unique as Pele in female form.
Wow.
And so just, all the small parts of the game that you could put onto the big field and translate. So once we started, you know, competing at the regional level in our first year at nationals as a youth club, uh, I think we were way ahead of where some other girls teams were as far as just sort of our innate ability to understand tactics and sort of study the. I was a defender most of the time. I started out as a central midfielder, then I ended up as a sweeper, so to speak. Um, I loved Franz Beckenbauer. I loved the way he played.
Mm.
I was more technical than you would ever imagine any center back to be. So I loved to dribble out of the back. By the time I got to college and I played center back, I was probably second or third in assists every year just by my passing
Wow.
ability. I was second or third in goals scored because of my ability on restarts. And then I moved to outside back in the national team pool, and I played right back for quite a bit. But I just think being able to study the game from the back and understand sort of composure and patience is something that developed in my game over time based on kind of what I was seeing when I was watching high level men's games.
Mm.
Um, so I just feel really fortunate. The practice was fun. I never remember dreading a practice ever.
That's great. Yeah, and you got to observe a lot of high level talent, and when you just watch, you learn so much, especially at that level. Now, you mentioned that you felt your group in Southern California was more advanced than others when you went to regionals and nationals. What do you feel like the difference was?
I think that we had, and again, there were some pockets in the country. I think Texas was one, the Northeast, Massachusetts, Connecticut was probably another pocket. Not very many teams in the South. Obviously, uh, the University of North Carolina, but most of their players at the time were coming from Texas and Washington. um,
Mm.
so the West, and Washington was another hotbed. I felt we came up against them in regionals quite a bit. Colorado sort of was starting to emerge, but Southern California, even more so than Northern California, was a hotbed. And so the way the games looked would be, uh, I think, more refined passing, more refined team play and movement, more ability for players to sort of interchange and the types of goals we would score. It wasn't just sort of run and gun or play very direct. It just seemed more organized. Yeah, it was just there was just a little bit about it until you got to the very top to nationals that was. It was hard to sort of put your finger on. One of the teams, even in our own area in Torrance, that we struggled with was because they were just so much more physical than us, either taller,
Mm.
bigger, stronger, hit harder, fouled more. But that was something that we learned through technique and skill and combination play to sort of overcome as well. So I just remember it being thinking about it makes me smile. It was a blast.
Yeah, those Southern California teams, the last club team I coached, we definitely struggled mostly with them, and there's so much competition, and every game is like a state championship game, I imagine, at the higher levels of Southern California.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, it was. Yeah, and I mean, you still look now. It's the player pool there is pretty silly, and there's a lot of kids. Obviously, there's a lot more parity around the country now, but back in the day, you used to see large number of kids in the youth national teams from Southern
Hmm.
California alone. Not just Northern California, but Southern California specifically, uh, on the boys and the girls side. Pretty big player pool down there.
Yeah, and that weather doesn't hurt either to be able to play year round. So,
No, doesn't hurt.
so you went to Cal, did really well as a defender over there, and you said you accidentally got into coaching. What was the accident?
Well, I I was kind of thrust into as a youth player as well as a college player into leadership positions, just as a player coach, kind of. When I had played on, I mentioned I played on the same club team from the time I was 13 till I was 18 or 19 or 18, and my coach he got married during that time. They were having a baby, late in my career, I was injured, and we were at a tournament in Las Vegas. I think it was regionals, and his wife went into labor, and he doesn't like to fly, so he had to drive home, and we had games, and so he put me in charge of the games, and
Wow.
that was daunting,
Yeah.
and fun at the same time. And and I tended to sort of just, because I was the one person that was on the team the entire 6 or 7 years, me and maybe a couple of others, I just kind of grew into this leadership position. Well, when I got to Cal, I mentioned that we were a club team still, or I kind of got pushed into being the president of the soccer club at Cal, and we had to fight for varsity status. I had to be the go-between between the club director and the athletic director. We had to remove our coach. So at the ripe old age of 18, I got to tell the man that recruited me that he was a nice guy and had done a great job for Cal Soccer, but that we thought that the AD was looking for someone with more of a skill set in organization and business to help push us over the top to be a varsity sport. So I was charged with taking him to lunch and dismissing him from his job, and,
Oh,
and
wow.
then hiring a man out of Southern California that was an attorney, not necessarily a soccer guy, but he was a soccer dad. But he ended up being sort of the founding father of Cal women's soccer. His name was Bill Merrill. He unfortunately passed away in his early 50s from throat cancer, but he got us varsity status. He got us scholarships. He entrusted us as players and empowered us to fight for ourselves to get what women's soccer deserved, and put us in our, sort of a place in history in the early 80s at Cal, where we were going to Final Fours. We were flying around the country. He was an attorney for Air Cal at the time, and he would get us non-rev tickets on airlines to go to New York to the Cortland State tournament, and I mean all these crazy things. And he was an inspiration and a motivator. His ability to teach the game was either from books or from bringing in other experts from Southern California that he knew, like Maureen Cano, like Chris Dangerfield from the Earthquakes. Like, he would bring those guys to our practices.
Mm.
There were no rules back then to have them coach
Yeah.
us, um, and so here again, my exposure to the game was it had a heavy British influence, I will say, but it was one where we had all these great men that took notice of women's and girls soccer and invested in us, and spent time helping us be better. And so by the time I was getting ready to leave Cal and go to law school, he was a lawyer, and he was, he was someone who I looked to as a father figure and a coach. And he said, "Lesle, you don't want to go to law school." He goes, "Why do you think I'm doing this for free? I hate being a lawyer." And I said, "You just don't think I can do it, Bill?" And he's like, "No, I think you can do it. I just think you'll hate it." And I said, "No, you don't think I can do it." So I went to law school for a year, and boy, if I didn't, I loved law school, to be honest, but like the people I met in San Francisco in the mid 80s that were, there's probably one lawyer for every 5 people in that city at the time. LA Law was a big
Yeah.
TV show. It was like the Perry Mason of the 80s. And
Mm-hmm.
I told him, I said, "You know what, Bill, I don't like this." And I was still coaching part-time, and I had stayed on after I graduated to help while I was going to law school. And he ended up leaving. I ended up staying at Cal for 4 years with 3 different head coaches. And Bill came back at the end of my assistant coaching position at the time, and I coached with him for one last year. And then jobs started opening up, and I thought, and I was playing at a pretty high level still, and still I was in the national B team, and I was still trying to make the national team, and playing amateur soccer and loving it, and able to coach. And so Irvine, Arkansas, San Diego State, a bunch of different jobs started opening, and people started calling me, and I'm like, wow, I could have my own team. And I just decided to break from Cal, and I took the San Diego State job because it was closer to home and my family, and I thought it would be a great opportunity with not a lot of pressure. It was kind of a part-time job when they hired me, and by the time I showed up in August, it was a full-time job. But they'd been a club, and so I knew what it was like to take a club team to varsity status, and it was just fun. No one was watching me. I was as good as any player on the team. I could play in with them. I could do everything by trial and error, and the expectations weren't really other than make sure the players have a good time and learn something, and that you guys can compete to the best of your ability. And so it was such a great training ground for me as a young head coach to be able to do that. And then I got involved with ODP, and 4 years later I was called about the Washington job and interviewed, and the rest is a little bit history. But it was it was not anything I ever intended to do. When I told my parents that I was leaving law school, my mom was a little more understanding than my stepdad at the time, but it was hard for me because I knew I was disappointing them. But in that disappointment, I knew I had to go with my heart and do what I felt like it is I was meant to do, and at the same time drive myself to prove to them that it was the best decision I could ever make for myself. And it was. And nobody's more proud of me today than my mom of what I've accomplished in my career.
What kind of values did your mom try and instill in you when you were a child?
I don't think she ever tried to instill anything in me intentionally. I think my mom was so busy trying to raise four hellions that it was just about putting food on the plate. And, my grandmother, may she rest in peace, died at 59. And that was probably, 7 or 8 years after my mom remarried, and my stepdad lived with us, and we were old enough to take care of ourselves. And she didn't really live with us during the week anymore. But my mom insists that we drove her to an early grave, jokingly, of course. But
I
looking
hope
back,
so.
might have been the case. But I think my mom was just working as hard as she could to make ends meet. And I had a family of aunts and uncles, and mostly aunts, and my grandparents and cousins around us. We just grew up as a family, and everyone was just trying to make ends meet. Nobody was rolling in the dough and able to do everything and anything that they wanted. But it was just kind of the simple life of you were in activities that you could afford, and my mom made sure that we were signed up for things and stayed busy so that she didn't have to worry about where we were. And when she was at work, and either my grandma was watching us or we were teenagers and able to either play soccer in the summer and make sure we went to school. And I think the biggest thing my mom unintentionally showed me was just unconditional love, and making sure that whatever it is I wanted to do, that it was something that made me happy. And if I was going to do it, to try my hardest and be the best that I could, and a work ethic that is unparalleled. I mean, my mom has just worked really hard her whole life to make something of herself. And so, she came from nothing. And I just have admired that my whole life, and tried to make sure that whatever she did to give me opportunities when I was younger, that I now as an adult make sure that I make the most of any opportunity I'm given.
Beautiful. What an amazing role model you had there.
Yeah, still have.
Yeah. So I'm a stepfather myself,
Uh-huh.
although I just call myself her dad.
Uh-huh.
What was the transition when he came into your life? How
Ooh,
old
that
were
is
you, and what was that like?
gay. Being a stepdad, that kids, well, I don't know how old your stepdaughter is. How old is she?
She's 20 right now. I met her when she was 7.
Yeah, brutal. I think stepkids automatically, depending upon the situation, but the most experience I've had is that stepchildren, especially I think with stepdads, they automatically just don't like you. And they make life hard on you in these weird kind of passive aggressive ways. So I think I learned I learned to be somewhat passive aggressive when my stepdad came into my life. One of the things, and he was 14 or 15 years older than my mom. So there was an age difference there. He had 4 kids of his own. My dad wasn't really in our lives that much after the time I was 6. He was in our lives somewhat, but not a ton. And, probably because my mom's wish that he not be, I don't know, no other real big reason than that. There wasn't anything that was so dysfunctional that it was, horrible growing up. It just is the way it worked out. But my stepdad he had 4 kids of his own that were all older than the 4 of us. We never lived together. He was a clinical pathologist, so he was a doctor who was used to doing things we weren't used to doing. But my recollection as a young person at 7 or 8 years old, that was all of a sudden he was in our lives and my grandma wasn't in my life as much. And so for that, I was, I think, angry a lot as an 8, 9, 10-year-old. And I remember just really making it difficult for him to assimilate to life with us when he finally they got married, and we moved in, and we moved houses, and a lot of things changed when he came into our lives. And I think more so for me, I clung to soccer. Not that it was bad, it was just, for me, it was a lot. And I think for my brothers, it was different. I think, it was hard for him to be a father to them in some ways. And so they just kind of ran rampant. And I more latched onto soccer and my friends and their families. And I looked to my mom for guidance, and I continued to work hard at the things that I did do. And I looked around and I knew what boundaries were, where sometimes my brothers didn't see them when school and behaving were concerned. I feel like I could always kind of get to the edge and know what was going over the edge. But, again, this was mid to late 70s, and life was kind of crazy then anyway. It was the sort of the hippie movement, and everyone was sort of out there. Post Vietnam was kind of a crazy time in America, and there was a lot. I think the divorce rate during that time was extremely high, and kids were sort of left with the first, one parent households or two working parents. And so I lived through that. And I think, at the end of the day, my stepdad gave me the idea that education, and here's a man that had 2 PhDs, that education was very important, that exposing yourself to different things and trying different things outside of just sports was really important, that seeing and traveling different places was important. Soccer was starting to give me that, and I saw what he meant. Again, I mentioned law school, and my oldest stepbrother is a lawyer. I have a stepbrother that's a doctor. And it was very important to my stepfather, who's Jewish, to be a professional. And that was something in their heritage that was always really important. And if you look at the Jewish culture, it typically sort of tradespeople, then professionals, And he talked about it all the time. It was a running joke with all my friends, because they'd come to the house and he would always say, so have you considered the sciences? It was like the running joke is like, okay, get ready. Dr. Silver's coming at you about being a biology major. And God forbid, one of my friends actually did end up going to medical school. He liked them more than he would like me. And I thought I was going to be a dentist. I thought I was when I went to Cal, I was a biology major for 2.5 years. I did end up settling on law school. And when I had to tell them I didn't want to do that anymore, it was like, you're joking, right? You'll take a year off, you'll go back. And I was like, I think I want to do this coaching thing. But at the end of the day, he was a huge advocate of mine. He loved me dearly, and he and I, into my adulthood, I would say, we butted heads for a long time, but into my 30s and 40s, and up until he passed away probably 4 or 5 years ago, he was just a kind man. And as finally a grown woman, I could see him in the light that I probably should have always been seeing him in, who was someone who was very caring and had my best interest in mind. I learned a lot from him.
Yeah, it's amazing you don't see that until later. And that same exact thing happened to my daughter. It took her being out of the house for a couple of years to realize that was actually okay.
Yeah, that you're an okay person. And and even with your own biological parents, and I talk about this with the players on my team all the time when I was as a college coach, is you need to grow into being able to make your own decisions and realize that there's things you're going to do that your parents aren't going to agree with. But if it makes you happy, you need to convince them that it makes you happy over time. They might not in the moment, but they're always going to love you. And then it's your job to own up to the decisions that you do make. And you're going to make some bad ones. And at the end of the day, they're going to be there for you. Your parents don't stop loving you because you make mistakes. And you just have to, the earlier you can, and the younger you can learn that, the better off you're going to be. But you just have to know that they're always going to love you, and they'll particularly love you if they can see that you're happy, and lean on them for guidance and support. Don't be so dependent that your decisions become their decisions as opposed to your own. But, the parent-child dynamic, it's different for every family, but it's an interesting one to be sure. And, I saw that up close and personal as a soccer coach all the time.
Yeah, I can imagine. So let's get back to soccer coach. So you went from San Diego State to University of Washington. You said that was your dream job.
Yeah.
And you had a lot of success there. What do you attribute your success up in Washington?
Failing. Failing and a willingness to fail. We had a lot of failure too. And I just think that it's hard to win. It's hard to be the only one standing at the end and to win a national championship. People talk about that all the time. To be Pac-10 champions in 2000 was quite a feat. We were the first team outside of California to do it. There's some powerhouse schools in our conference, and I just felt like competing the right way and putting our players in a position to play the best and be the best was always my job. I never wanted to coach to save my job. I never wanted to coach to pad our record or shy away from the difficult teams. I wanted to be the teams that people feared playing, and that wasn't always easy. I just think there were some things at a big public school like Washington when it came to scholarships and aid, and not being able to package financial aid or academic aid with other aid made it difficult to recruit against schools like Cal and SC and Stanford and UCLA. But we did it, and we managed to have what I will look back on as a career and say to have enough success that I can say I felt successful. But at the end of the day, my win-loss column isn't what I'm ever going to judge myself on. I'm going to judge myself on the kids that I did right by. I'm going to judge myself on the kids that I felt like I could have done better by, and the I will judge myself and the job that my coaching staff and I did in developing a program that people wanted to continue to be a part of long after their last game that they played.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. It's all about the kids at the end.
Yep.
So now you've transitioned to the Girls Academy Commissioner. What is your new role going to be like? And it's basically it's a new thing. So tell people about it.
Yeah. Back in April, the U.S. Soccer decided to dissolve the Development Academy, which had been in place, I think, coming up on 8 or 9 years on the boys' side, but only 3 years on the girls. And for whatever reason, either financially or they wanted to reorganize what they were taking on. There were other leagues, I think, that U.S. Soccer probably felt were doing a good enough job that they didn't have to have that under their umbrella at the time either, or it didn't have to be run in-house. Who knows? But I also saw a lot of clubs and coaches who invested a lot of time and energy into being in the Development Academy, and also just, long-term being in the youth game, particularly when it came to girls that were sort of left out in the cold with no place to play. And and I've got to see firsthand just sort of the predatory, terrifying way that youth soccer operates sometimes with players and coaches, and grabbing up teams and swallowing up leagues, and kind of the fight for the almighty dollar, and just sort of the power structure of it all is interesting, to say the least. And I don't have as much of an interest in that as I have in trying to help girls in the game have a platform to be empowered to sort of have control over their own pathway in the game, whatever that looks like. If their pathway in soccer leads them to be a coach, if their pathway in soccer leads them to be a national team player, if their pathway in soccer leads them to be an athletic director or an administrator or a referee or someone who or is on the organizing committee for the Olympics or a World Cup, I want them to understand that that's something that they can do, and they can see people who've done it. And because I am a true believer that soccer is the world's game, can give that to you. And if they're going to be a CEO of a big company that has nothing to do with soccer, then their soccer environment will have given them the confidence as a young woman to think that they can do that too. And obviously in combination with their education. But I think this league, in just a short period of time, the Girls Academy, has shown me that there's a bunch of people out there that have that same idea, that same vision, that we need to do better by our girls and women in this country in all aspects of life. And soccer is just one more platform that I think we can help them. I think soccer is, again, being the world's game, is one where all over the world there's story after story in small towns and cities where soccer saves lives and can be something that is inclusive as opposed to divisive. And I think there's no other or better time in this country to fight for gender equality and fight for inclusivity when it comes to children of color, girls of color. Yeah, I mean, these all sound like big, social things. I'm in it to help make those things better. Whether I'm going to solve them all or not isn't the question, but am I going to work towards having it be a better place for kids to be? 100%. And at the same time, I think we can help those elite players, which are, again, a small percentage of the kids that end up playing sports. Can we help those elite players achieve their goals if they show the potential and the capability of doing it? We certainly are going to. So I think it's just a really exciting and fun thing to delve into right now at this point in my life. I have the energy to do it, and for me, having a remote job was a little bit of a box I needed to tick for now, at least for the next few years, is to be able to stay home and not pick up and move my location in Seattle, and be able to work from, here and travel to places and do my job well. And to not be on the field with players and coach was a difficult thing to give up for now. It doesn't mean that I'm giving it up forever. You never say never. The college game isn't something I'll be a part of again. But would I like to coach players again on the field? I think I would. But that, that's a TBD type of thing for me. And I know enough clubs and coaches that would let me guest coach if I felt like I needed to get the fix of being on the field with players, because I do think I will always be I will first and foremost always be a player at heart, but I will always be a coach at heart.
Now, do you still play?
No. Well, I have played 7-a-side at my alumni games at Cal. A little bit of 1 and 2 touch, break into a jog. I've got I've got a significantly bad right knee. I can still kick a ball. I can still, my touch is okay, but walk soccer is probably the best way to describe how I can play right now. But I I did play at a pretty high level up in through my 40s, and we won a couple national championships here in Washington on our amateur teams, and so in my head I can still play. Is that gonna help?
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. Yeah, you have to learn to change how you play, almost play smarter, not harder.
Yeah, and as a coach, I'll
Type
tell you, my
mentality.
players didn't really ever realize this, but my sympathy for them was high. I was just like, soccer hurts.
Yeah.
It is if you are not fit, it is a physically grueling sport. So I would always be like, God, we can't make them run that much more. Like we gotta ease up on them. And my assistants would look at me like, God, you have gotten soft. I'm like, I know, I'm just realizing how painful this game is, or like the tackles in youth soccer sometimes. And I was a center back, and defending. I love defending. And I just look at some of these tackles in youth soccer, and I'm like, ow, God, just no. Anyway, it's like learning to hate roller coasters when you're older. But yeah, in my head, I can still play.
That's good. Well, it's all the mentality. That's the most important thing
Mm-hmm.
right there. So, one question I get a lot about, especially at this time, is what is the recruiting landscape like right now during this coronavirus? Since a lot of college camps have been canceled, a lot of games have been canceled, so there's not as many opportunities for coaches to see players. What do you recommend players do, and how to soothe their parents' worry?
Yeah, I think that is the $1 million question, or at least the $200,000 question if you're worried about college tuition, right?
Of
Um,
course.
yeah, so it's one thing to say something, and it's another thing as to what the reality of what happens. At the highest levels of Division I college soccer, I would love to say to kids who want to go and play at a big time program, and they think they're going to get a scholarship to go play in some of these bigger conferences and whatnot, and they feel like nothing's going to be left if they don't say yes right away. I think there is a reality to that, and I already know that there's kids through COVID who haven't been seen as players in the last, 5 or 6 months, who have not been able to visit college campuses, that are committing verbally and saying yes to going to schools where they've never been before. Well, in the last couple of years, there's this thing called the transfer portal, and that thing is filled with players who made bad choices.
Hmm.
Thousands of just Division I female coaches. I don't have access to the portal now, but if I were to ask one of my college friends to go on and look, I guarantee you it's probably over 2,000 kids
Wow.
and or women, and that's just unfortunate in my eyes. And maybe I'm old school that way, in that, what, if you don't like your decision, great, go somewhere else. But the investment that coaches make in choosing players, and how much you see the sort of the innocence of these kids that think they're going to go be at this one school, and academically it's the right fit, and soccer it's the right fit, and parents are so relieved and excited that this is going to happen, and then the number of people that it goes sideways for is just sad, in my opinion. And a lot of that has to do with the process has been sped up too much. The process isn't thorough enough. Parents tend to panic that because coaches are pushing a little bit, that it's not going to be there for their kid at the end of the day. And again, I understand why they feel like that. So if I was still a college coach, and I've been on plenty of podcasts with my associate head coach, Amy Griffin, is now a club director for the OL Reign here in Seattle, and she's had many college coaches on to do podcasts for her club, talking about patience, and make sure you look and make sure you ask the right questions, and at least do virtual tours of the campus, and dig in on the internet to see what the place is like, look at what kind of players they have on their team, see if you can go back and look at old video of their team playing, ask for old video to see that the style fits you. I mean, do all the things you can possibly do virtually, talking on the phone with the coach, establishing a rapport and a relationship with them, is really, really important to see if your personalities match and if you think this is going to be somebody that you want to play for. Ask around, in your club for kids that have maybe gone to that school, or what other people's experience have been. How many transfers have they had in and out? Are people happy there? And again, the experience is what you're going for. One team's going to win a national championship. North Carolina's won 22 of them in the time that I've been a coach. So,
wow.
There's only Portland's won 2, Santa Clara's won 1, Notre Dame's won 2. Who else has won 2? Stanford's won a couple. Yeah, there's only a couple other schools that have won multiple, and there's a few that have won 1. And if I had time, I could tell you all of them. But my point being, at the end of the day, one team wins the whole thing. If you want to be the player that goes and tries to make that program that academically fits you, that you're going to have a blast and have a great experience, and you're going to be a big contributor on and off the field, and you're going to have to work hard, and it's going to be fun. It shouldn't be the means to an end. It should be something that you go and spend this awesome time of your life where afterwards you're going to have to hit the real world and probably have a job and probably, be a contributing member of society. College is the place that you have this last bit of freedom where it should be a blast. And if soccer gets to be a part of it, do your homework to make sure that you have the best chances of that happening. And there's so many places where that can be that kids haven't even thought of. But the peer pressure to, and the expense of club soccer and youth soccer to try to make it be this one certain thing has kind of gone off the rails. And it's really refreshing as a college coach, or even as someone in the youth game now, where you hear these parents who are letting their kids guide the process and supporting them in it. But, and in some people's eyes, making unpopular decisions. So I'm going to wait. Ooh, really? Well, what if? Well, I'm going to bet on me. I'm going to bet that I'm good enough that I still am going to have the opportunity to go somewhere where I feel like I'm choosing, as opposed to it's choosing me. And I have a say in my own happiness. And I think it's just it's a really gray process for a lot of kids. And when parents are not educated on it, or they're either first generation college students that they're sending off to school, or they're parents that don't have any idea how the athletic side of college admissions and selecting a school goes. It's I think if they're paying a lot of money for club soccer, it behooves the clubs to really help educate them on that. It's not just up to the college coach. That these parents are investing a lot in club soccer. Clubs have I think a duty to make sure that kids and parents are being educated on what the landscape is like. But that's also being proactive. You have to do that education yourself. You can't just wait to the end of the day and think it's going to work out for you. But it's I don't envy kids. I think it's a great thing to be able to say that you're a college athlete and this is what you want to go and do. But it certainly seems to have become something that's way more stressful than it should have ever intended, that it ever should have become. It's crazy how negatively emotional recruiting seems to be for a lot of people.
Yeah. What do you attribute that to?
Early recruiting, the ability to commit early, the ability to just, sort of insinuate that there's going to be scholarship money for a kid, and just trying to grab kids up in their freshman and sophomore year, as opposed to waiting till a little bit later in their high school time. And even now that they've pushed the rules these last couple of years to a little bit later, I think you might see it swing back to being a little bit more thorough and give the kids a little bit more time to figure out what is best for them. I hope it swings back that way, but the early recruiting and these freshman, sophomore commit things, and then they're waiting for 3 years to go somewhere. And then maybe, coaches go kind of cold on them because all of a sudden this kid that they've committed isn't as good as they thought they were going to be. Oh yeah, puberty happens, and this is not what she looked like 2 years ago, and this is not how she played, and this is not, and the kid that's a late bloomer that, oh my gosh, I didn't even notice this kid 2 years ago. Look how good she is now. It's just, it's a guessing game. And again, it's the relationship piece of it has the amount of time that you have to understand one another as a coaching staff and a player and a family is limited. So all those things have made it more difficult. It takes a lot more work now to get it right for the player and the coach and the college coach, to be honest. It's a lot of guessing game still.
Yeah. And I can imagine sometimes you win, sometimes you lose in that guessing game.
Yep.
So
hence the transfer portal.
Yeah, exactly. So if what advice do you have for parents who are receiving, or players who are receiving this pressure from coaches to commit early? Like, how can they step into their power and say, you know what, I want to wait to make this decision? Because there are some who may only have one or two offers and they just want to snag that up. So what kind of
Mm-hmm.
advice do you have for them?
Well, if they feel that way and they do feel like those are their only options, and then hopefully leading up to those two options, they at least feel comfortable with those two places. But if they're not sold on them, then they should wait. They shouldn't just jump because they have to. They sort of have to hedge their bet that they will find something. And so a lot of times players have to be willing to say, "I'll walk on. I think I can make your team," or can I have a roster spot at least, or to just wait and reopen their search down the line a little bit. But if they get to the point where they're panicked that that these two opportunities are the ones they have and they're not going to come, then leading up to that point, you would hope that they had done their own research proactively enough to feel comfortable with those choices. So it's the wait too long to know anything about it and then feel like you are just literally throwing a dart at the board and praying that it works out. Is where you find yourself in a bad spot. And I think that that's where, again, club coaches, high school coaches, helping and being involved in the recruiting process early. Again, when a kid's a freshman or a sophomore, they need to start at least thinking about the process from an academic standpoint, thinking about the process from an athletic standpoint, and having people in their lives and in their inner circle that are honest enough with them that know what potential they have to play at what level. I think that's where kids are more often than not sold a bill of goods, is that they have people that are telling them, "Oh yeah, you can play there," when not really. It's and that's the thing that I watch the most, is that parents and kids don't want to hear that, and they think it's you're not doing your job because you're being honest with them, and then they end up a couple years later with they've been looking at school X when they should have been looking at the level of school Y a little bit more, and they didn't listen, and then they do end up kind of unhappy or without opportunities, and they think it's someone else's fault. So they've got to have a really good self-awareness and have people in their camp that are willing to have those honest conversations. Like, where do you really think I can play? What level? What schools? Where should I be looking? Yeah. And again, I feel like it's the duty of clubs that have paying customers as kids and parents who should be able to lean on them for that kind of advice. There should be experts in that field at the club level that understand that. And it's not just how many kids can we put on our website that are playing at top 20 schools. It's, are you doing right by every single kid that's playing in your club, if this is their goal?
Yeah, that's great advice. I have some other questions. I'm going to jump into some parent questions, parents who asked me questions to ask you. And so I'm going to give some hometown advantage for the New Mexico people that reached out to me first.
Shout out to the 505.
That's right. So Alex from New Mexico asks, how would you build a great girls program at the club level if you're starting from scratch?
Well, the GA isn't starting from scratch, the Girls Academy. I think if you're going to build a great girls club from scratch, that you that you have a great game model at the youngest age group, so that you understand what a U10 player, let's say depending on the age group you're starting at, that your U10s, your U9s, and your U8s, that you understand what the key qualities for those players are to have before they get to age 10, 11, 12. And obviously that starts with the technical piece of the game, but I think we underestimate players a lot and their learning capability. And so building in small-sided games that require decision making, and not just making sure that they're technically sound and have a ton of touches on the ball, but that you're putting them in problem-solving situations, and you're always, as a coach, teaching players to think at a young age, because I think that's where you find most, when you get to the 11, 12, and 13-year-olds who physically are starting to be able to do different things technically because of their size or their speed or their technical ability, they haven't been put in positions to problem solve with their technique. So the decision in that split moment to be able to execute that technique under pressure is what's going to make them a better player than someone else. And so making sure that we give kids the freedom to think and solve problems on their own. And that's setting up activities where you don't overcoach, but you put them in instances where they have to fail to learn. And I would get the coaching model from the bottom up right from the very beginning. That's how I would develop a club. And when you talk about gender specifically, girls, I think that, and Heather Dyke is a very good friend of mine, the coach at UNM. And I was around when she and her sister-in-law founded and started the Lead Academy. And the whole premise behind that was not just number of touches on the ball in sessions, but it wasn't necessarily making it about not competing, but you weren't on a team. You were there to be empowered as an individual player to fail and to have a growth mindset on, okay, it's to normalize making mistakes, because soccer is a game of mistakes. And I think their methodology and their way of thinking, and putting especially young girls who tend to be a little bit more meek or don't really find themselves in positions very often where, they feel like they're empowered to lead themselves, or that they can have leadership capabilities, that they can find those on the soccer field. I think that's really, really important in a female environment, is to make sure you're letting young girls understand that it's okay to fail, but now what are you going to do with that failure? And to have the right people around them to foster it, and to really make sure that it fuels them to improve and to try new things, and to not worry about, what just happened, but to move forward to the next thing and grow from it. I think those environments tend to be few and far between. And, it's kind of a structure that's unstructured, and that you put them in, and that you sort of nurture. But I think that's for the female mindset. I think we underestimate. I think it's for boys a lot of times too, is that we think that boys want to be yelled at and told, hey, you're better than that, or the bravado of it all. I think boys sometimes quit sports because they're badgered too much, and it doesn't become fun for them, because all they ever hear is what they've done wrong and not what they've done right, and that doing something wrong is the end of it, and they're told that it's wrong but not how to fix it. And so I just think the psychological aspect of how you build your game model has to be as important as the technical and the tactical piece of it.
Awesome. You're speaking my language. I love it.
Yeah.
So Nathan, also from New Mexico, he asks what differences you see with today's technophiles and past athletes that you coached.
Technophiles and past athletes. What does that even mean? People that are in love with technology?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So attached to their phone, is that what he means?
Pretty much. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think we all have to live in the moment, and I think there's things that I definitely, and you've heard it probably just in how I am, and my story and my background. I think if I wasn't drawing on my own background, that I would be doing my players a disservice as a coach, and even my coaching candidates, if I didn't sort of remain true to myself and draw from my past experiences, which were mainly pre-technophilia, if you will. But at the same time, I would have never gotten to where I gotten if I didn't stay up with the game, the modern game, with technology, with what the different tools that we can use. I think my biggest learning curve came probably 5 or 6 years ago in the college game alone, when I was exposed to, as a coaching educator, and with U.S. Soccer and the MLS and the leagues, as to what technologies like Prozone were doing with analytics and what they were doing. And so, what different kind of video editing we can do, what kind of analysis we can do of the game, and periodization and all these different things based in science that we can do to make the game better. And we all dove really head first and heavy into trying to have the latest and newest gadget. And how can we, and in the college game, I learned about 3 years into that, you don't have time to use it all to the best of its extent. That all of that stuff is meant more for the professional game full time, when you have 12 months and you're playing a 60 game season, not a 20 game season over 9 months, as opposed to 12 weeks in college. And you're not rotating players at the end of a 3-month period and losing seniors and gaining freshmen. So learning how to dial all that back into the necessities of what we actually need in our environment. And I tell coaches in the coaching schools this all the time: don't do more than what you need. Don't use more technology than what's going to help you. And if you get so involved in the technological side, you're going to, kind of take your eye off the proverbial ball and miss what's actually back to old school, what's actually going on in front of you with your players and with your team, with your own bare eye and your own expertise, trusting what you see and what you can coach. So I think it's been a big learning curve. I think there are so many things technologically that can help the game and that are put you at an advantage and are just so fun to study. But if you don't get your head out of the computer and your butt off the chair as a coach and relish being on the field with actual living, breathing human beings, if COVID has taught us anything, coaching on the field is way more fun than all of that stuff for me personally. So I think it's always good to have a technophile on your staff.
Well, what about, I think, Nathan may be thinking more of a player. Do you see a difference between, let's say, players that you coached your last year at Washington versus when you started at San Diego State or your first year at Washington?
Yeah, I think it's much more difficult on teams now with cell phones and with technology. It's become a different chore. And again, we can't put this on kids. We're as addicted to phones as adults as the players on our teams are. Who's kidding themselves? So it's just become a different ball game to socialize your team and your players in a way that works for them. Put the cell phones in the basket, where no cell phones on the bus, no this. I mean, I think you have to have flexibility and rules around all of that stuff, but you have to spend more time in team building and in connecting them, face to face, eye to eye, and their communication skills. You have to meet them where they are a little bit, but at the same time, I think it is more of it just happened more organically before. Now it's a little bit more of a task that you have to pay attention to, is how is every player on the team being socialized into this group, and how are they communicating with one another, and are they communicating in a way that is two-way and not via text? Are they having important conversations face to face as opposed to texting each other or sending someone a DM or non-verbally, or however they're communicating has to be paid attention to, because at the end of the day, building trust and being able to have hard one-on-one conversations and group conversations with a team are the most important thing that can make or break a group. And so 100% over the last decade, we've had to pay attention to that as coaches way more than we did before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think for parents, it just said there has to be limits.
Yeah.
That's the thing, and to not use electronics as a babysitter too much.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Okay, so let's see. Melissa from California asks what you look for in your goalkeepers and what favorite techniques or favorite games do you remember from Hope Solo?
Oh, man. Where's Amy? Where's Amy when I need her? No, I talk about this all the time. I was just watching one of the NWSL games the other day, and there's this thing, and it happens a lot in men's soccer, and it's kind of the modern goalkeeper. I want to say I have this old school vision of goalkeepers, but Amy Allman, she's on the 91 World Cup team and my associate head coach for 24 of my 26 years. She is only 5'4" and managed to make it as a goalkeeper onto the national team at 5'4". Wow. So athleticism is something that is really, really important. Someone that obviously their physical capability, it doesn't have to do with height. Height helps clearly in your frame, but your athleticism and your footwork and your ability to be mobile and agile and explosive and all those different attributes physically are huge for a goalkeeper, because I watched her at 5'4" have to maximize her athletic ability to be able to cover the goal alone and to be able to understand how to cover her box and play. The other thing she had to do at 5'4" was learn the game in a way that she saw less shots. So being able to organize a team in front of you, which didn't come for Hope Solo until much later in her career, because Hope could make the exceptional game-winning save that was out of this world, that looked like she was from, Matrix, that you just didn't see in other goalkeepers. So she could rely on that, and she relied on being a great shot stopper and shot saver due to her athletic ability as opposed to organizing, whereas Amy tried to tell her, and when she got to the pro game and was in the WPSL and went over to Sweden and played, and they didn't speak English, she learned to organize her teams a lot better, and she is a very good reader of the game. So Hope's organizational ability made her have to make that great save less, but she could then do both. She could organize her back line and read the game and prevent shots. And then when she had to make the big save, she could. Goalkeeping is emotionally and mentally exhausting. And Amy always talks about putting field players in goal for at least one goalkeeper training a year to get them to have sort of an appreciation for what their goalkeeper does physically. And, it's a little bit like rowing in crew. The amount of training there is to actual race opportunities is similar in goalkeeping to the amount of training you do to the amount of times you actually have to make that save to save a game, not win a game, but to save a game, at least keep your team in it. That ratio is way skewed compared to what it is for a field player. So just understanding the mental fortitude and the attitude that a goalkeeper has to have. And, goalkeepers get called crazy all the time for even wanting to put their face in front of a ball. I got sidetracked a little bit. I was talking about these kick saves. So there's one particular technique that I can't stand in goalkeeping, and it's the one where they come out and they're cutting down the angle and they make themselves big, and then the shot happens. Instead of going hands and chest to the ball, they put a foot out and make like a hockey save. And it works sometimes, but just on sheer geometry, it covers so much less of the goal. And I saw someone get scored on Amy Rodriguez scored the other day on somebody. Utah was playing, and I was like, and she went with her foot and she made herself like, it just didn't cover it. And I've seen Amy make that save 7,000 times, and it was chest to the ball, feet to the far post. You cover so much more. You just make yourself big. And I've seen it hit her way more often than not. Or just to have the bravery to put your face down there and go chest to the ball to someone's feet. And that's how that save should happen on a breakaway or when you're one-on-one with a player. And that's how Hope would make that save. And I've seen it 1,000 times, but there's this new thing where they're set, they stand up and they try to make this weird hockey save. And it just, I don't know, it's my pet peeve. So I don't know who started teaching that or when it became a thing, but as a lay person, that's not a goalkeeper coach, it drives me nuts. Hope in the penalty kicks, Brazil versus Germany in the World Cup in 2011 was one of the highlights as a coach and a friend and a person for me with her, that she could actually see and hear Amy and I in that huge crowd during those penalty kicks. And, it was a special, special moment. We won the Pac-10 championship in 2010. Hope was our goalkeeper at Washington, and there were some saves she made that year. Particularly 2 saves against Stanford, against Marsha Wallace, against who was the other one against? Maybe Marcy Ward, I don't remember. But she made some saves in that game that were otherworldly. One where I put my head down, I said, she almost had it, and Amy's hitting me on the shoulder on the bench. She did get it in her hands. So I'm like, oh. So I learned to start playing it way more cool when Hope was in goal later on in her career. But there were some things that she did that were otherworldly, and there's a reason that she holds the stats that she does. And as history moves along, I think people are going to appreciate Hope more and more for her accomplishments because her statistics, and she got to a point in her game, but I personally think her career ended too early, but she got to a point in her game where it's just going to be really tough for anybody to match.
Yeah, she was incredible.
Yeah.
So just go with one or two more here. Tristan from Alabama says, what advice do you have for young players who don't have a girls academy or high level platform in their market?
Yeah, that's a great question. And part of my thing with the GA is to look at the map and look at these states and people that have been sort of area code or zip code deficient when it comes to these leagues. And they've been either overlooked or haven't had the access or ability to join. I think that there are plenty of opportunities for players. At the end of the day, it's on the player. If you're good enough, someone will find you. It's Bethany Balser from the OL Reign right now, who played in a tiny club in Michigan and went to an NAIA school and then became the rookie of the year in the league last year for a professional woman. And so a lot of times it's how you make your own opportunities. And so it's less about trying to get on the team that wins the most or the team that you feel is going to show at the showcase the most. It's honing your own skills and continuing to put yourself in a position to be your best. And I always feel that it's not the amount of money you plop down or the crest that you're wearing or the league you belong to. It's what you personally do to go after what it is you want in the game. And so I think that, as again, when you talk about club players as paying customers, I think players in their own pathway have to make sure that they are players, not parents. Parents can support, but players should be adamant um, about their own development. And if they don't feel like they are, uh, learning the things they should learn, how do they learn them? Is it going out on their own? Is it finding camps or other ways to put themselves in different environments where they can be exposed to something different? Is it on their own where people aren't watching, going and playing with boys because it's quicker, faster, and they have to make better decisions, and then they do rise to the top on their own club team that maybe someone hasn't noticed before? There's plenty of outlier stories in the game of soccer where I think those are the great stories where people's pathway hasn't been the pathway that other people think is the best way. And so I think it's a personal journey that kids have to realize they need to take responsibility for if they want to get where they want to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Where there's a will, there's a way. And
Tristan,
if you're listening to this, check out the episode I did with Jay Demerit. He literally went to Europe and was knocking on doors of clubs just to get trials, and eventually made it to Watford in the English Premier League. So yeah, definitely where there's a will, there's a way.
There is. And we talk a lot of times, it's sort of a cliche, but we talk about, are you a soccer player or just someone who plays soccer? And if it is in you and it is something that you have a deep burning passion for, you're going to find a way. And it's a game where size doesn't matter. You could be short, you could be tall, you could be like soccer really is a game for everybody. And you can find a way if you've got the passion to forge your own path. And you have to have the ability at some point in time to reach the highest levels, but go down trying is always my thing. If you love it that much, go down trying, and that's on you, not on someone else.
Absolutely. Great advice. So what kind of advice, final question here, what kind of advice would you have for parents who are raising athletes today?
Teach them ownership. Yeah, you're raising athletes, teach them ownership, teach them balance as much as you can in the weird world of structured youth sports. Let them do other things as long and as much as they possibly can, and encourage it, as opposed to, making them specialize at such a young age that it's all they know. I've seen more often than not, that one, it leads to burnout, and two, I don't think in the game of soccer, I don't think it makes them the best player that they can be if they're not adept at other things. I think just honing different parts of your brain and muscle memory is something that's important in youth development. So, but be supportive, but teach them ownership of their own path in anything. I think that's, as I'm a parent, and I think it's the hardest thing to do is to stand back and watch your kids fail because you feel like it's an extension of you. But it's the best lesson you can teach them is to teach them how to use failure as fuel for better, and just go have your own little sad moment in the closet by yourself, and then come back out and put on a good face for them. But let them pick themselves up and go for it again, and just be their biggest fan, but let it be theirs.
Beautiful. Amazing advice there. Lesle, thank you so much for your time today. Wish you best luck with your new role as commissioner of the GA. Stay safe up in Seattle, and I expect a signed copy of your book whenever you finish that.
It is coming your way, Gabe, and it's great to reconnect with you after all these years, and I really appreciate you having me on. Thank you.
So what were your biggest takeaways? Now, when I listen to the interviews after I record them, I take notes and write down things that really strike me. And I kept writing stuff. I found myself listening to this interview with Lesle, I kept writing stuff. It's like, oh my God, that's great. That's great. That's great. That's great. And I was going to talk about so many of them, but then it was like, it kept getting better and better for me. And then even until the very last minute when she spoke about letting your child fail. And that is what really ended up striking me the most. And that's something that comes up in a lot of the workshops that I do, and it comes up in a lot of the sessions that I do with my private clients who are parents of athletes and just parents in general. And that is a really difficult topic. And as Leslie mentioned perfectly, a lot of parents view their child's failure as a reflection on them. And it absolutely isn't, right? It is essentially an experience. People decide to label it as failures. And of course, that's their choice, but is that really the healthiest way? Now, what I often tell the parents in either my workshops or my sessions is I say, think about your life and when you didn't succeed at something, because I don't like to call them failures. I like to call them learning experiences. But I'll say, when did you learn the most? Did you learn the most from victories and successes, or when you lost, or when you didn't achieve something you wanted to do? And the parents sit and they think about it and they remember, oh yeah, like failing, or quote unquote failing, is actually an amazing time for growth and to develop and get better. I know from my personal life that when I didn't achieve something, I learned the most from it, and I was really driven to actually try and conquer what I didn't achieve and what I wanted to achieve. It gave me the extra motivational push if it was really that important to me. Some things just aren't, and it's the same, I'm sure that went for you, and the same for your child. And the same thing goes for me as a coach, and I'm sure Leslie as well. My teams got better when we actually lost games, because I was able to look and say, okay, where do we need to get stronger? And then you fix the issue or issues, and then your team ends up getting stronger. So a lot of parents don't feel comfortable with their child, quote unquote, failing. And again, they usually do that because they feel as if it's a reflection on them and their parenting. And in my work, and I've talked about this in several of my other episodes, our stress levels, any kind of negative emotion that we're having, any shame, any doubt, any fear, comes from three different possibilities. Either feeling as if we have a lack of control, feeling as if we lack or could lack security, like job, health, housing, other material objects, or a fear of not having approval. And when we start to compare ourselves, that fear is enhanced. When we start to compare our children to other children, that fear is enhanced. And when we start to compare our parenting to other parents, our fear is enhanced. When we start to compare ourselves to this ideal image we have of ourselves, then the fear is enhanced as well, along with a lot of other uncomfortable emotions. So really, in order to counter that, it is important to essentially throw away this idea that we need to seek approval from other people, from outside sources. All the approval you need is already inside of you. Everything else is just a thought, a belief, an illusion that other people's approval of us makes us complete and makes us happy. And it's just absolutely not true. It's a complete illusion. It's the outside-in illusion that outside sources complete us, make us feel whole, when it's really our thinking that does. And that is the inside-out reality. And that's something that I always like to work with my clients. And I love doing it. I love pointing in that direction. As always, I'm happy to help you do it as well. You can always reach out to me, gabe@aclearmind.com, or go to my website, aclearmind.com. Now, I hope you enjoyed this episode with Leslie as much as I did. If you did enjoy it, I ask that you please go to whatever platform you're listening to and rate the podcast. If you can leave a review about it, to review it on Apple Podcast, you just scroll down past the list of episodes. It should be at the bottom to be able to rate and review. And of course, subscribe to it so you don't miss any other episodes, and to share it with others so that they can listen to stories like this one, this amazing one with Lesle Gallimore, new commissioner of the Girls Academy and former head coach at University of Washington. Again, I'm always here for you. Just reach out, gabe@aclearmind.com. And as always, much love to you and many blessings.